Urbanization in the Gilded Age. The Gilded Age was a time of industrial and urban growth in the United States. Production rates of materials such as iron and steel rose as the country produced more and more buildings and train tracks. With these resources, the country not only became better connected, but also more urban and had a larger population in the city. Urbanization allowed cities to flourish and new buildings and bridges to take the scene. This time provided a shift from rural to urban life, and as new cities rose, people from all places fled to urban areas for job opportunities that city life promised. Urbanization thus changed American society to that of one filled with bridges, skyscrapers, and diversity.
Between 1880 and 1900, the population of the cities in the United States increased to 15 million people. Most people complain that it was due to the influx of many immigrants for the huge increase in population. However, a good amount of people moved to the city from rural areas because of the promising job opportunities. As a result, the cities expanded in terms of area, and the buildings within the city grew higher. Commuting also became popular because there were more chances for careers in the city. There was a new beginning to urban entertainment as well as a more diverse culture from a mesh of the different types of people. The city life in the Gilded Age provided a foundation for a more diverse society in America.
Before the Civil War, it was harder for people to find work because they could only travel within walking distance as a result of no other forms of transportation. The improvements in public transportation were another contributing factor for the growth of cities. Railroads started out as the most common source of transportation because they were controlled by a number of large corporations. Shortly after, cable cars were invented in order to conquer going up steep hills. The Brooklyn Bridge was built in 1883 in order to hold the cable cars, and it was most helpful for the people commuting from residential neighborhoods into the center of the city because it provided a faster commute. However, cable cars stopped running in 1909 when electricity was accessible for trolleys. Trolleys provided a cleaner and less expensive way for transportation. For many years, the route of the trolleys ran through the 5 boroughs of New York. However, trolleys became less useful and efficient when fuel-powered cars grew more popular. Because trolleys were placed in the middle of the road, they became a hazard, so between 1930s and the 1940s, they started to be replaced with motor buses.
The subway system was first constructed in 1900 by the Interborough Rapid Transport Company. Before 1904, the subways were completed and already carried 100,000 passengers by the first day of completion. Subways created a faster way for New Yorkers to travel in and out of the city quickly. The subway tracks were extended into open areas outside the city, so consequently, it contributed to the increase in space and turned into the city into a main metropolitan area. The subway traveled at a rapid 40 miles per hour, which was faster than any other form of transportation at the time. Passengers had the ability to choose between a local or express service, and because it ran underground, there was less of a chance of delays relating to weather. The average fee for riding the subway was always 5 cents, no matter how far a passenger was traveling. Because the mass transportation system grew popular, its effects contributed to the segregation of city workers by income. The upper and the middle classes used streetcar suburbs in order to avoid the city's pollution, poverty, and crime. The older sections of the city were left to the working poor class, consisting mostly of immigrants.
Not only did transportation improve, but the architectures of the city vastly increased. In the late 1880s, significant changes in the buildings and structures began to appear. Expansion began to grow not only into the suburbs, but also upwards in many city areas. The first skyscraper, the Home Insurance Building, was built in 1885. This revolutionary building was built by William LeBaron Jenney in Chicago. The building had 10 stories and was 138 feet tall. The skyscraper was made out of steel, and the outer facing of the building was created with bricks. People were amazed by the height of the structure. They thought that the top of the building scraped the sky, hence the name skyscraper. In order to efficiently travel up and down the many stories of these skyscrapers, Alicia Otis came up with the invention of elevators with safety in mind. In the beginning of the skyscraper was so foreign to the public that many people feared the safety of it. Regardless, by 1900, steel-framed skyscrapers for offices of industry and commerce became the new vision in the skylines of American cities.
The ethnic neighborhoods came about after the wealthier people moved out of their original neighborhoods, which left them for the poorer population. The rooms were very small with no windows. Over 4,000 people would be crammed into one city block. In 1879, New York City passed a law saying that each bedroom was required to have at least one window, as a way to help resolve the poor conditions. As a result of these horrid environments, the buildings were overcrowded and filled with diseases including cholera, typhoid, and tuberculosis.
The different immigrant groups made very distinct ethnic neighborhoods. For instance, each neighborhood had its own culture, language, church, temple, or social gathering group. They each printed their own newspapers and built their own schools. It was important for immigrants to hold on to their traditions and customs. These neighborhoods were sometimes referred to as ghettos. Despite the poor conditions and diseases, these neighborhoods served as a home to many immigrants. Before 1870, over 5 million people immigrated to the United States, primarily coming from Western Europe. The large number of immigrants all at once caused an influx of people seeking work. As a result, this overwhelmed the city's ability to provide adequate, safe housing and sanitary services.
As changes continued in the metropolitan areas, residents of the city simply tried to continue their lives like they had in their prior lives, in smaller areas. One problem with this was that often people would not await many public services from municipal governments. As a result of this, the cities had much difficulty handling the buildup of garbage, pollution, disease, and crime. However, over time, people advocated for better-kept cities by persuading citizens and the government of cities of the need for purified water, sewage systems, waste disposal, street lighting, police departments, and zoning laws to keep urban development under control. Overall, as changes in the city began to appear, so did the development of sanitation and security.
Urbanization would not have been possible without the minds of people who were able to bring the necessary changes to action. Jacob Riis, a social reformer, photographer, and reporter, was one of these individuals. He was born on May 3, 1849, and he immigrated to the United States at the age of 21. In 1873, he became a police reporter in the Lower East Side of New York.
Using his photography skills, he proceeded to take photographs to help support his lectures on the severity of the poverty in the city. He would travel into poor neighborhoods and capture the images of the true conditions of the slums and its people. With these photographs and experiences, Riis wrote a book called How the Other Half Lives, describing the life in the slums and the terrible conditions the people had to live with. The book shocked the people of 1890 and made him incredibly famous. Even President Theodore Roosevelt was touched by Riis's work, saying, "I have read your book and I have come to help." His book thus reached all different classes of people. As a result of President Theodore Roosevelt's reaction, the first significant New York legislation to curb tenement house evils was stimulated. Riis also wrote another famous book, which was his autobiography known as The Making of an American, written in 1901. Many of his books portrayed the ethnic and gender biases within the United States, and he often reflected on the different ethnicities in these neighborhoods. Unfortunately, Riis died on May 26, 1914 in Barre, Massachusetts. His concern for the urban poor constituted a precedent for subsequent environmental justice movements and were a large part of urbanization.
Overall, urbanization changed city life, as the people provided a diverse and crowded environment. Transportation improved and increased, neighborhoods grew and presented the need for better safety regulations, and buildings and bridges were built that still stand today, leaving urbanization's mark on modern society.